add notes after that, okay? All right, so the quiz you just got back covered lessons 1, 2, and 3. This chapter, I believe, has a total of 7 lessons. So we're moving into lesson 5-4, and the title of this lesson is called Common Multiples and Common Denominators. Go ahead and get the title of today's notes in your notebook, this lesson. You do need the title of the lesson. But in a minute, I'm going to kind of show you some of the notes, and I don't want you to just start writing those notes down. I want you to listen to me first. Let me teach it to you first, and then if you need to go back and take the notes afterwards, you can. Sound like a game plan? Yeah. Okay. Because I know you all don't love taking notes. Nobody does. But sometimes we can learn super, super, super well by just listening. And then all that writing you won't even have to do. Okay? All right. So the first thing that we're going to come across learning is something called common multiples. All right. Now, don't write this down. Listen first. We're going to learn through listening. Does anybody see in this title a word that stands out to them? Olivia, what stands out to you in that title? In the title, right up here. The green stuff.
Oh my God.
Multiples. Anybody say it after them? I hope that's what I was hoping you would find. Like earlier in the chapter, we learned this thing called greatest common factors. Emily, are you with me? This means you're with me. Greatest common factor is when we played with multiplication facts. Remember, that's why factor and facts kind of sound the same. If I'm playing with multiples, what do you think I'm going to be using? Yes?
The answer.
The answer to what?
The answer to
Multiplications. The answer to a multiplication problem. That's why they're called multiples. So if I'm searching for common multiples, I'm searching for a number or maybe a couple of numbers that two things have in common, okay? So let me take you to a different screen for a second and let me show you what I mean, okay? Let's say that the directions asked you to simply find the multiples of, give me a number, Emily, give me a number.
84.
No, more like a one-digit number, honey.
Oh,
9. Okay, she made it hard on us. It's okay. All right. 9. So let's say that we have to list the multiples of 9. So that means I'm going to either be like counting by nines, because that's what multiples do. They count by that number. Or I'm listing the multiplication facts for 9. Okay? So as Xander told us, we're going to be writing the answer to the multiplication problem that we get for these 9s. Now, the directions might tell us how many they want us to write. So let's say that the directions for this one says, list the first 5 multiples. So tell me, what would they be? What's 9 times 1, everybody? 9. What's 9 times 2?
18.
What's 9 times 3?
27.
What's 9 times 4?
36.
What's 9 times 5?
45.
There's my first 5 multiples for 9. That's it. That's listing, oh wait, there's noises. That's listing a multiple, okay? Now if it says list the first 6 multiples for 9, can I stop at 45? No, I'd have to do the next one, which would be 54. Knowing your multiplication facts makes this little thing so simple. For those of us that are still struggling a little bit with our multiplication facts, you're going to have to kind of get your brain moving in that direction, because in order to know multiples, you got to know your multiplication facts, okay? So if the directions ask you to just list the multiples, that's all you got to do. But what happens if it asks you to list the common multiples? Well, then that means you have to have another number to compare it to. So Emily gave us a 9. Give me another number, Shane.
3.
3, okay? Shane gave us 3. Now, in order to find the common multiples, what do you think? What other work, Shane, do you think I'm going to have to do?
Are you going to have to list the multiples of 3?
I got to list the multiples of 3 also. So, Shane, give me the first, 6 multiples of 3.
3. 9, 12, 15, 18, 21.
Okay, now, I might have to keep going because I gotta find the common multiples. And at this point, do I see any numbers that they have in common?
Yes.
Carson, what do you see? Carson sees a 9. He says they have a 9 in common. Do you see any others that they have in common?
Yes.
Henry, what do you see? Henry sees an 18 that they have in common. Anybody see anything else? James? No. So I found 2 of them. So far, I've found that they have 9 and 18 in common. But what happens if the directions say that I have to list the first 4 common multiples? What do I got to do then, Hallie? I got to do more multiples. I got to keep going. So let's go back to 9. Okay? I got to keep going. 54. What comes after 54? 63. What comes after 62?
72.
Okay, let's add some more to my 3s. Let's see, what comes after 21?
24.
27. Did I find one? I found another one. Okay, here's another one. 27's another one they have in common. And I would technically have to keep going more to find the 4th one. What's the 4th one?
It's 36.
You found it? Now, we don't see it here yet because I ran out of space. But if we kept going, I would have 33. Then I would have 36. Okay. So 36 would be the 4th one that they had in common. Do you notice how I had to just keep writing them out until I got to the 4 that I found they had in common? So look, friends, that work that I just did right there, that is what this means, common multiples. To find a common multiple, you simply have to list the multiples of numbers and find the ones they have in common. Okay? If they ask you to find the first 3, then all you got to look for are 3 of them that they have in common. But sometimes they're going to ask you to look for lots of them, like maybe even 8. Find the first 8 common multiples. So you think you're going to have to list a lot of numbers if they're wanting a lot of common multiples? Yes, probably so. How does common multiples feel? Okay. So if you need this information, I'll let you add it. Okay. The book defines common multiples as multiples that are the same for 2 or more numbers. And my example that I give you, are 2 and 3. I listed the multiples of 2. I listed the multiples of 3. And your job is to start searching for ones that they have in common. Okay? Questions on common multiples? All right. Well, let's build on that. Okay? Yes, Emily. Oh, so now that we know how to find common multiples, what if it asks you to find something called the least common multiple? The least common multiple. We call this thing the LCM. So just like GCF stands for what? LCM stands for least common multiple. And you're going to use this when I teach you to add and subtract fractions. So see, I'm giving you tools now to be successful with the next chapter. So I think James has already figured this out. So going back to our practice problem, if this red stuff right here, James, are all the common multiples, what's the least common multiple? The least common multiple is the smallest number that they have in common.
Yep.
That's all the least common multiple is. It's kind of like the greatest common factor is the largest number that they have in common. The least common multiple is the smallest one that they have in common. What, Dominic?
You can do like 2 things in one question.
What do you mean?
Well, with this, you're finding the greatest common multiple.
You're finding the least common multiple.
Yeah, but with so basically, when you're finding the least common multiple, you don't have to keep on going with that. You just have to find the lowest one.
Yes, yes, yes.
Kind of go backwards.
Right, kind of, yeah. And you would never find the greatest common multiple because you would just keep going on forever, right? It's never so stop. So there's no such thing as a greatest common multiple. You would only look for the least common multiple. What?
It's weird to think that numbers never stop.
It is weird.
I used to ask my mom, what's the highest number?
Yeah.
And I never
Because we live in our life has a beginning and an end every day. Like the day starts at a time and it ends at a time. You know, our swim lesson starts at a certain time, it ends at a certain time. So we want everything to have an ending, but numbers don't. So that's kind of what throws our brain off a little bit. Yeah, Shane.
What is the biggest number right now is complexity?
Is that what it's called?
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you for that knowledge. Yes, what?
I used to think that when we ran out of combinations for numbers, we would just go to letters, and then when we ran out for combinations of letters, we would go to like symbols, and after that we would go to like emojis or something. But I realized like a couple months ago, you can just keep on adding another number at the end.
That's right.
It
Never comes to an end. Okay, so let's jump to this slide right here. All right, now obviously, I don't want you practicing all of these, but this page here has 2 skills on it that I just taught you. The top stuff in blue is practicing on just writing the multiples of that number. So I want you to do number 2 in the blue, okay? Obviously, you're not finding common multiples, you're just finding multiples. I just want you to list, and how many? I want you to list the first, what does it say in the directions? 8. So you have to list the first 8 multiples of 4, okay? Then I want you to go down to the green, and so I'm going to kind of scroll it down a little bit so that you can see the green as well. And I want you to give me the first 4 common multiples for number 1. So you're doing number 2 in blue, number 1 in green. Go.
What number?
2 in blue, 1 in green. Okay. This is where you show me that you're learning what we're doing. Okay, you listed the multiples. You did the 1 in blue. Now I want you to do the green number 2. Okay? Everybody is giving me working 2 problems. Yes, James.
You know how numbers can go on infinitely?
Say again.
You know how numbers can go on infinitely?
Uh-huh.
Well, there's this one word in the English alphabet that takes 3 years to pronounce.
I don't know about that.
It's a medicine thing.
Yeah, I think medicine or bacteria.
Then how do they tell people
I don't
what to, like, what
Yeah, that
you
they
have
need
this
it?
medication,
Yeah.
this medicine?
It's
All right, let's
abbreviating.
Okay, let's not get too far off topic, okay?
Number 2 in green.
You don't have to do that one. You just have to do problem number 1 in the green. All right, James, I'm going to borrow you. Come on up to the board up here, James, and I want you to list the factors for, you're going to do number 2 on the board, okay? So everybody at this point should be finished with their answer for the blue number 2. So James is going to show you what you should have for your answer. Go. Make sure you have 8 of them, James. And then you can have a seat. Cassie, do you have a question? Is it what? No, not if you do your multiplication facts for 4. So you got like 4 times 1 is 4, 4 times 2 is 8, 4 times 3 is 12, 4 times 4 is 16. Okay, and we'll keep on going, okay? All right, so James has proven to us what question number 1 or 2 in blue should look like as an answer, okay? The first 8 factors for number 4 should be 4, then what? 8.
12, 16, 20, 24, 28, 32.
There's your first 8 factor, or 8 multiple, sorry, okay? And all you had to do was know your multiplication facts to figure that out. 4 times 1 is 4. 4 times 2 is 8. 4 times 3 is, and just keep going, okay? Now, the other one that I asked you to complete was, James, I'm up here, was number 1 in green, okay? So this one took a little more time because this time you had to list the multiples of both 3 and 5. And you had to keep on listing those factors until you found the first 4 that they had in common, okay? So let's come back over here. Now look, we already did 3, right? Because a minute ago, Shane told us to do 3. So I'm not gonna redo that one. I'm gonna keep 3's factors listed. But I'm gonna go ahead and get rid of 9's because that wasn't the other number that I needed, right? The other number, Sophia, that was being asked to list was what?
5.
Okay, so Sophia, she's gonna help us. Let me clean up my board here to make sure that we don't actually have anything here that we do not need. All right, so we don't know if this is gonna be the common one, so we gotta get rid of this. So. All righty. Okay, so there's 3's factors. Sophia, give me 5's factors. Go.
5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30.
No, I can't write that fast. 30, 35.
40, 45, 50, 55, and 60. That's how high you go.
Okay. All right, and she knew that she could stop there because she was searching for the first 4, right? So Sophia, give me the 4 that they share.
15, 30, 35, and 60.
15, 30. What'd you say?
15, 30, 45.
I circled the wrong thing. 45,
And 60.
which we need to add some more to our 3's because we don't have enough of them, right? So what do we have here?
For 36, you need 39,
Uh-huh.
42, 45, 48,
Ah,
51,
yeah.
54, 57, and 60.
Holy moly. Okay, so 3 had tons of factors listed, right? But then I was able to locate my remaining common ones, which are these guys down here. So if I list my common factors for 3 and 5, this is my work page. I don't need you to do all of this on your answer page. This is what's done on your work page. But now on my answer page, I'm going to list what my common factors are, which are 15, 30, 45, and 60. Those are your common factors, 4 of them. Now, if it wants you to find the least common factor, or the least common multiple, sorry, then which one would be the least common multiple, Xander?
The least common multiple would be 50.
This one would be 15. The smallest number they have in common. What?
I have a thing where it's like whatever the first number is, like whatever, like, for this one is 15. But for example, 3 times 4, you just have to add on 12 each time, or add on 15.
I'm not following what you're saying, but that's okay. That's your system. You keep your system working. Okay.
Yeah, I got it.
All right. Now, I will tell you, we got one more thing that we have to learn, okay? But when you are finding like the least common multiple, pay attention. Some of you I'm losing, I can tell because I've lost your eyes. Eyes tell me you're listening. Some of you, your eyes are staring into space. Okay, you're not learning when you're doing that. But one other little quick trick to help you to finding the least common multiple is, remember prime and composite numbers? If the numbers that they give you, if both of the numbers that they give you are prime numbers, like 3 is prime and so is 5, then all you have to do is multiply those together to get the least common multiple. Okay? And that will always work, okay? So if they're both prime, you just multiply those guys together, and that'll give you the least common multiple, okay? But you might still have to list them, like if the directions ask you to list the common multiples, then you still have to do it. But if it just asks you to find the least common multiple, then if they're both prime, just multiply those 2 guys together and it'll give you the least common multiple. How do we feel so far on these things? Okay, so one more piece of information, all right? So we've learned common multiples, we've learned least common multiples, but underneath this is one extra little thing, and that's this thing that we call least common denominator, okay? And notice my little bubble in red says you're going to use this to add and subtract fractions. So what we're going to be learning in chapter 6 and 7, you have to know how to do this first. Because this stuff is the tools that you're going to need to add and subtract fractions. Okay? So what does least common denominator mean? It is nothing different, put your hands down. It's nothing different than least common multiple. The only difference is, and look up here for a minute, the only difference is that the numbers that you're going to start with are going to be fractions at the start, okay? Like when we were finding least common multiples, we started with numbers, right? When I asked you to find the least common multiple, I'm asking you to start with these numbers. When I'm asking you to find the least common denominator, you're going to be starting with fractions, like this. That's the only difference, okay? So how you solve it is no different than how you would solve least common multiples, okay? So let's look at the example. And I know some of you are trying to write all this down, and I'm jumping around because I don't want you writing it down. I want you listening and learning. So let's look at this example, okay? So this particular example has the fraction 3/4, it has a fraction 2 over 5, and it has a fraction 9 over 10. So it's called least common denominator because the number that we look at is the number that's in the denominator spot. So in the fraction 3/4, which one of those numbers is the denominator? Brennan? 4. So now I'm going to list the multiples of 4. 4, 8, 12, 16, 20. Okay. The next one is 2 over 5. What's the denominator, everybody? 5. So I'm going to list the multiples of 5. 5, 10, 15, 20, 25. The last fraction is 9 over 10. What's the denominator? 10. So I'm going to list the multiples of 10. 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. So to find the least common denominator, I look for the smallest number that 4, 5, and 10 have in common, which in this example is what? 20. So do you see how we did everything basically the same? The only difference is we started out looking at fractions instead of just looking at a number. And so that's why it's called a least common denominator and not least common multiple. Okay, so let me take you to the other page that I had you at a second ago, and I want you to try one of those. So here in pink, let's try fraction. Let's try number 2. Okay.
I already know it.
Okay, and some of you might, and that's great. You don't have to always list. I want you to get to the point where you don't have to list all the multiples. But you could just look at 2 numbers and instantly know the smallest multiple they have in common. Some of you can already do that. But others of you are not there yet, and that's okay. So you might need to list the multiples. Okay? Now I will tell you, if there's any of you in that crowd right now thinking that if I'm looking at problem number 2, this one right here, and you're looking at the denominators of 3 and 9, if you're thinking the least common denominator is a 3, you're wrong. It's not 3. Because you have to list the multiples of each number. And if I list the multiples of 9, would I ever have a 3 in my list? Never. Okay? So,
Which one are we doing?
number 2.
I know one answer.
Now remember, if they were both prime, we could use that trick and just multiply those 2 things together and have our least common multiple. And sometimes it works if even one of them is prime. Like in this example. So who wants to tell me, what do you think the least common denominator, Tessa, what's the least common denominator? Tessa thinks the least common denominator is a 9. How many of you agree with her? I do also. But if you had to list it, you would list your multiples of 3. So she went 3, 6, 9. Did she have to go any more? No, because the other number is a 9, and right away, if she started listing that number's multiples, she would find the one that they had in common. Okay. Do they have other things in common? Yes. But is it the least common one? No. Okay. All right. So, friends, your assignment. You haven't had homework from me for a while. Boys in the back. I'm not sure what your attention is focused on. Your homework assignment, and you have about 5 minutes to get started on this now in class. It's workbook pages 79 and 80. In a minute. So everybody open your workbook real quickly because I want us to look at this workbook page really fast. If you need it, go get it if it's out in the hallway so that we can make sure everybody understands exactly what today's assignment is asking you to do.